The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon as I pulled my 18-wheeler into the truck stop outside Flagstaff, Arizona. Another day, another haul. That's been my life for the past 35 years. The name's Frank Miller, 58 years old, with more miles under my belt than most folks will travel in a lifetime. I've seen just about everything the American highway has to offer, from the neon-lit diners of the Midwest to the vast, empty deserts of the Southwest. Route 66 has been my second home, my faithful companion through divorce, through my kids growing up and moving on with their lives, through the slow transformation of this country. The usual Frank? Maggie, the waitress at the Desert Star Diner, knew my order by heart. Black coffee, 2 eggs over easy, side of bacon and wheat toast, the same breakfast I'd been having since 2003. "You know it, Mags," I replied, settling into my usual booth by the window. From here, I could see my rig, a 2015 Peterbilt 389, midnight blue with silver trim. Not the newest model out there, but she was paid off and reliable. In this business, that's what counts. My phone buzzed. A text from my daughter, Sarah. "Happy birthday, Dad. Call when you can." I'd almost forgotten it was my birthday. 58 years old today. Where had the time gone? I scrolled through my dispatch app, checking the details for today's haul. Electronics from Phoenix to Los Angeles. A straight shot west on I-40, then south on I-15. Should be an easy run, barring any unexpected traffic or weather issues. I'd be in California by nightfall, drop the load in the morning, and pick up something heading back east. "You look tired, Frank," Maggie said, refilling my coffee without asking. "Long night?" "Just the usual," I replied. "Getting harder to sleep in that cab, though. Age catching up with me, I guess." The truth was, I'd been feeling restless lately. 35 years on the road, and what did I have to show for it? A small house in Albuquerque I barely lived in. A relationship with my kids that existed mostly through phone calls and occasional visits. A body that ached more with each passing year. As I finished my breakfast and left my usual tip, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different about today. Maybe it was just the birthday making me sentimental, but there was this strange sensation in my gut. Like the feeling before a storm hits, that electric tension in the air. Little did I know, as I climbed back into my truck and pulled onto the westbound interstate, that this routine day would be anything but ordinary. That by sundown my life would change forever on this stretch of America's most famous highway. The CB radio crackled with the usual chatter as I settled into the rhythm of the road. Truckers warning each other about speed traps, complaining about dispatchers, or just fighting the loneliness with idle conversation. I mostly kept to myself these days, but I always kept the radio on. It was like a campfire in the digital age, a place where road warriors gathered to share stories. I was about 2 hours west of Flagstaff, somewhere between Seligman and Kingman, when I needed to pull over. Nothing unusual, just a quick pit stop before pushing on toward the California border. I pulled onto one of those scenic viewpoints that dot Route 66, the kind tourists stop at to take photos of the endless desert landscape. The place was deserted, not surprising for a Tuesday morning in April. I stepped out of the cab, stretching my legs and back. That's when I heard it. At first, I thought it was just the wind, or maybe a small animal. But then it came again, unmistakable this time. The cry of a baby. My heart rate spiked as I followed the sound. It was coming from behind a cluster of rocks and scrub brush about 20 yards from the parking area. I moved quickly, scanning the ground, expecting to find maybe an abandoned pet or wildlife in distress. What I found instead stopped me cold. There, partially hidden under a small juniper bush, was a cardboard box, and inside that box, wrapped in what looked like a cheap motel blanket, was a newborn baby. Red-faced and crying, tiny fists waving in the air. "Jesus Christ," I whispered, dropping to my knees beside the box. The baby couldn't have been more than a few days old. A little girl, from what I could tell. She was clean and appeared well fed, but her face was streaked with tears, and her cries were getting weaker. I looked around frantically, expecting, hoping to see someone, anyone who might have left her there momentarily. But there was nothing but empty desert in all directions. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Someone had deliberately abandoned this child here in the middle of nowhere. My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone. This was way beyond anything I'd encountered in my decades on the road. I'd seen accidents, helped stranded motorists, even talked a few desperate souls down from the ledge over the CB. But this was different. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher's voice was calm, professional. I've found an abandoned baby, I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. A newborn. Someone left her in a box on the side of Route 66. As I gave the dispatcher my location and answered her questions, I gently picked up the baby. She was so small, so fragile in my weathered hands. Her crying softened as I held her against my chest, and she looked up at me with these big, dark eyes that seemed to hold all the questions in the world. Help is on the way, sir. Please stay where you are, the dispatcher said. I'm not going anywhere, I replied, looking down at the tiny life in my arms. I'm not going anywhere at all. The wail of sirens grew louder as I sat in my truck, the air conditioning blasting to keep the baby comfortable in the desert heat. I'd fashioned a makeshift cradle from my jacket on the passenger seat, and she'd finally settled down, her tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. I couldn't stop staring at her. Who would do this? What kind of desperation would drive someone to leave their child like this? 2 police cruisers and an ambulance pulled into the viewpoint, kicking up dust clouds that danced in the morning light. As the paramedics approached, a strange feeling washed over me, a reluctance to hand her over. Sir, I'm Officer Martinez with Arizona Highway Patrol. Can you tell me exactly what happened? A young cop with a serious expression stood at my door while the paramedics carefully took the baby. I recounted finding the box, the baby's cries, the complete absence of anyone else around. As I spoke, I watched the paramedics examining her, checking vitals, wrapping her in a proper blanket. We'll need you to come to the station to make a formal statement, Martinez said, flipping his notebook closed. I can't, I replied automatically. I've got a load to deliver in Los Angeles by tomorrow morning. My dispatcher is already... Sir, this is a potential criminal investigation. Abandoning a newborn is a felony. I nodded, understanding the gravity, but my mind was racing through the logistics. The late delivery, the potential loss of income, the black mark on my record, 35 years of perfect deliveries, and now this. Look, I've told you everything I know. Can't I just give you my contact information? I'll be back through here in 3 days. I can stop in then. Martinez's expression hardened. That's not how this works, Mr. Miller. A female paramedic approached us. The baby appears healthy, but we need to get her to the hospital for a full examination. Officer, we're ready to transport. I watched as they carried the tiny bundle to the ambulance, feeling an unexpected tug in my chest. What's going to happen to her? I asked. Child Protective Services will be notified. They'll take over once she's medically cleared, Martinez explained. Now about your statement. My phone rang. The dispatcher. I held up a finger to Martinez and answered. Frank, you're running behind schedule. GPS shows you stopped. Everything okay? The clipped voice of Diane, my dispatcher for the past decade, filled my ear. I've got a situation here, Diane. Found an abandoned baby. Police are involved. A beat of silence. Jesus, Frank. That's terrible. But the client in LA is high priority. We can't miss this delivery window. I looked at Martinez, then at the ambulance where they were loading the baby. My job, my livelihood, my perfect record, all on one side. A nameless, abandoned child on the other. Frank, are you there? I can try to find another driver to take over your load, but it'll be tight. I took a deep breath. No, I'll make the delivery. Just give me an hour to sort this out. As I hung up, Martinez was already shaking his head. Mr. Miller, I don't think you understand. Officer, I cut him off. "I've been driving these roads since before you were born. That little girl deserves justice, and I want to help. But I also have responsibilities, people counting on me. Can we compromise here?" The Kingman police station was a squat, beige building that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1980s. After some negotiation, Officer Martinez had agreed to take my statement here, closer to my route, rather than back where I'd found the baby. I'd already called Diane to explain the delay, and she'd reluctantly adjusted my schedule. I sat in a small interview room, a foam cup of terrible coffee cooling in front of me. The door opened, and instead of Martinez, an older man entered. He moved with the deliberate pace of someone who'd seen it all and wasn't in a hurry anymore. "Mr. Miller, I'm Detective Sam Reeves." He extended a weathered hand which I shook. His grip was firm, his eyes sharp despite the wrinkles surrounding them. "I understand you're the one who found our Jane Doe." "Frank," I corrected. "And yes, I found her." Reeves settled into the chair across from me, placing a thin file on the table. "I've been a detective for 27 years, Frank, 16 of those in special victims. Know how many abandoned babies I've seen in that time?" I shook my head. 17, he said quietly. "Each one breaks your heart in a different way." Something in his tone made me look up from my coffee. There was a depth of understanding there that caught me off guard. "How is she?" I asked. "Stable. Doctors say she's about 3 days old. No signs of abuse or neglect, thankfully, just abandoned." He opened the file, revealing photos of the box and blanket. No identification, no note, nothing to trace. I recounted my story again, every detail I could remember. Reeves listened intently, occasionally making notes. "You know," he said when I finished, "most people would have made the call and kept driving. Especially someone with your schedule constraints." I shrugged. "Couldn't do that." Reeves studied me for a moment. "No, I don't suppose you could." He closed the file. "We'll be checking security cameras from nearby gas stations, interviewing locals. These cases are tough. People who abandon babies don't usually leave a trail. So what happens to her now? She'll go into emergency foster care once she's released from the hospital. Then, if no one claims her, he let the sentence hang. The system," I finished for him. Reeves nodded, a shadow crossing his face. "I've seen both sides of it. Some kids find loving homes. Others," he trailed off, then fixed me with an intense gaze. "You have kids, Frank?" "2. Grown now. Don't see them as much as I should. This job, this life on the road, it takes its toll on family, doesn't it?" I nodded, feeling the familiar weight of regret. My ex-wife's words echoed in my mind. "You're married to that truck, Frank, not to me." Reeves pulled out a business card and slid it across the table. "I'm heading this investigation. If you remember anything else, or if you just want to check on her status, call me, any time." And as I pocketed the card, he added, "You know, Frank, sometimes life puts us at crossroads when we least expect it. I was about your age when a case changed the direction of my life completely." He stood up, adjusting his belt. "You're free to go. Make your delivery. But something tells me this isn't the end of your involvement here." As I walked back to my truck, Reeves's words followed me. A crossroads. At 58, I'd thought those days were behind me. I climbed into my cab, started the engine, and pulled back onto Route 66, heading west. But my thoughts remained with a tiny baby in a Kingman hospital, alone in the world except for a detective with sad eyes and a truck driver running behind schedule. The California border came and went as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. Normally, I'd be focused on the road, maybe listening to an audiobook or some classic country. But today, my mind kept drifting back to those tiny fingers that had briefly wrapped around mine, to those dark eyes looking up at me with complete trust. I made my delivery in Los Angeles with barely an hour to spare. The warehouse manager gave me a hard time about cutting it close, but I barely registered his complaints. After signing off on the paperwork, I found a truck stop for the night, but sleep wouldn't come. Instead, I found myself pulling out Detective Reeves's card, turning it over in my fingers. Before I could talk myself out of it, I dialed his number. "Reeves," he answered on the third ring, his voice gruff with fatigue. "It's Frank Miller, the truck driver from this morning." A pause. "Frank, didn't expect to hear from you so soon. Everything okay?" "I was calling to ask you the same thing about the baby, I mean." I heard him exhale slowly. "She's still in the hospital. Doing fine physically. They're calling her Baby Jane for now. Any leads?" "Nothing solid yet. We found some security footage from a gas station 5 miles east of where you found her. Shows a white sedan pulling into the viewpoint around 4 a.m. Can't make out the plates or the driver." I processed this information, picturing someone driving through the pre-dawn darkness with a newborn, making the decision to leave her there. "Frank, can I ask why you're calling? Most people who find themselves in your situation are happy to walk away once their civic duty is done." I stared out at the rows of parked trucks, their running lights glowing in the darkness. "I don't know," I admitted. I keep seeing her face." Reeves was quiet for a moment. "I understand. More than you might think." Another pause. "Look, I don't normally do this, but if you're heading back this way, you could visit her. Sometimes in these cases, having a familiar presence can help." "A familiar presence?" I only held her for 20 minutes. "You were the first person to show her kindness in this world. That counts for something." After we hung up, I sat in the darkness of my cab, Detective Reeves's words echoing in my mind. I had a choice to make. My next load was scheduled to take me to Denver, in the opposite direction from Arizona. I could call Diane, ask for a different route, but that would mean explaining why. It would mean admitting that I couldn't let this go. I pulled up my dispatch app and stared at it for a long moment before typing a message. "Need to request route change. Personal emergency. Can you route me back through Arizona?" The reply came almost immediately. "Everything okay, Frank? This isn't like you." No, it wasn't like me. In 35 years, I'd never let personal matters interfere with work. I'd miss birthdays, anniversaries, school plays, all to keep the schedule, to be reliable. "It's important," I typed back. "I'll explain later." 3 dots appeared as Diane typed, disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, "I'll see what I can do. Stand by." I leaned back in my seat, my heart pounding as if I'd just narrowly avoided an accident. I was crossing a threshold, deviating from the carefully plotted route of my life. For what? A baby I'd found by chance? A child who had nothing to do with me? Yet as I closed my eyes, I could still feel her weight in my arms, so light, yet somehow anchoring me to something I'd been missing for longer than I cared to admit. My phone buzzed with Diane's response. "Got you a load to Phoenix. Pick up tomorrow at 10 a.m. Everything all right, Frank? This is the first time in 12 years you've asked for a route change." "Thanks, Diane," I replied, ignoring her question. "I appreciate it." As I set my alarm and finally prepared for sleep, I knew I was driving into uncharted territory, and not just on the map. The Kingman Regional Medical Center was smaller than I expected, a modest building that seemed to hunch against the vast desert landscape. I'd made good time from Los Angeles, dropping my load in Phoenix and taking a detour north before my next pickup. At the reception desk, I cleared my throat nervously. "I'm here to see the abandoned baby that was brought in yesterday, Baby Jane." The receptionist looked up, her expression immediately suspicious. "And you are?" "Frank Miller. I'm the one who found her." Her eyes widened slightly. "Oh, let me call up to the pediatric floor." While she made the call, I shifted uncomfortably in my boots. What was I doing here? I had no claim to this child, no right to visit. Yet something had pulled me back across the desert, something stronger than logic. "Mr. Miller?" A woman in scrubs approached, extending her hand. "I'm Nurse Patel. Detective Reeves called to say you might stop by. Come with me." As we walked, Nurse Patel filled me in. "She's doing very well. 5 pounds, 7 ounces. All her tests have come back normal so far. Has anyone come forward? Any family?" She shook her head. "Not yet. A social worker from CPS has been assigned to her case. She's here now, actually. We entered a small room where a middle-aged woman sat next to a clear hospital bassinet. She stood as we entered, her expression guarded. "This is Ms. Hernandez from Child Protective Services," Nurse Patel introduced us. "Ms. Hernandez, this is Mr. Miller, who found the baby." "Mr. Miller!" Her handshake was firm, professional. "I understand you've taken a special interest in this case." There was something in her tone, a hint of suspicion perhaps, that put me on edge. "I just wanted to see how she was doing." Ms. Hernandez nodded, but her eyes remained evaluative. "It's unusual for finders to follow up like this." "I'm not your usual finder, I guess." Nurse Patel sensed the tension and intervened. "Would you like to see her, Mr. Miller?" I nodded, and she led me to the bassinet. There she was, looking even smaller in the hospital setting, wrapped in a pink blanket, a tiny cap on her head. My throat tightened unexpectedly. "Can I hold her?" Nurse Patel smiled. "Of course, sit here." I lowered myself into the rocking chair, and she carefully placed the baby in my arms. Those dark eyes opened, looking up at me with what seemed like recognition, though I knew that was impossible. "Hey there, little one," I whispered. "Remember me?" Ms. Hernandez watched our interaction closely. "Mr. Miller, I should inform you that baby Jane will be placed in emergency foster care tomorrow. We have a family ready to take her while we search for her biological relatives." I nodded, not taking my eyes off the baby. "And if you don't find them, then she'll eventually be eligible for adoption. There's a long waiting list for healthy infants." The door opened, and Detective Reeves entered, looking tired but alert. "Thought I might find you here, Frank." He nodded to the others. "Any updates?" Ms. Hernandez shook her head. "Nothing yet. We've put out notices, but so far no one has come forward." Reeves turned to me. "Frank, can I speak with you outside for a moment?" I carefully handed the baby back to Nurse Patel and followed Reeves into the hallway. "We got a hit on the car," he said without preamble. "White Toyota Camry, 2017, registered to a Sandra Wilkins, 24, from Flagstaff. We're trying to locate her now." "You think she's the mother?" "It's our best lead. The timing fits. Car at the scene around 4 a.m. You find the baby a few hours later." He studied my face. "You look like you've got something on your mind, Frank." I hesitated. "What happens if you find her? The mother, I mean." "Depends on the circumstances. Abandonment is a serious offense, but there are safe haven laws. If she'd left the baby at a hospital or fire station, it would have been legal. But leaving her exposed in the desert," he shook his head, "that's endangerment at minimum. And the baby? If we find the mother and she's deemed unfit, or if she voluntarily terminates her rights, then baby Jane goes into the system permanently." I nodded, processing this. Back in the room, I could see Ms. Hernandez watching us through the window, her expression unreadable. "Frank," Reeves said quietly, "I've been doing this a long time. I can tell when someone's getting attached. Just be careful. This isn't a stray dog you found on the highway. There are procedures, laws." "I know that," I replied, perhaps too quickly. "I'm just concerned, that's all." Reeves didn't look convinced. "Uh-huh. Well, I should get back to the station. We're bringing in Ms. Wilkins for questioning if we can find her." As he turned to leave, he added, "By the way, that social worker in there, Maria Hernandez, is good at her job, but she's seen too many people with savior complexes come through these doors. Don't take it personally if she seems skeptical of your interest." I watched him walk away, then turned back toward the room where a tiny life lay in a hospital bassinet, surrounded by strangers trying to determine her fate, including, somehow, me. I found myself in a motel on the outskirts of Kingman that night, having called Diane to request a day off for personal reasons. She'd been surprised I hadn't taken a voluntary day off in over 5 years, but had arranged for another driver to cover my next pickup. The motel room was like countless others I'd stayed in over the decades. Faded carpet, a bed that sagged in the middle, the faint smell of industrial cleaner, barely masking years of cigarette smoke. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone. Detective Reeves's latest update displayed on the screen. They'd found Sandra Wilkins. She'd admitted to abandoning the baby, but claimed she'd had no choice. Young, unmarried, working minimum wage at a diner in Flagstaff. The father was some guy passing through town, or so she'd told Reeves. I scrolled through the local news on my phone. The story had made headlines. Abandoned newborn found by trucker on historic Route 66. There was even a grainy photo of me walking into the police station, my face partially obscured by my cap. The comments section was filled with outrage toward the mother and praise for me, the hero trucker who'd saved a life. It felt strange, seeing my actions described that way. I hadn't done anything heroic. Anyone would have stopped, would have called 911, wouldn't they? My phone rang. Sarah, my daughter. I hesitated before answering. Dad, are you okay? I just saw the news. I'm fine, honey, just got caught up in something unexpected. They're calling you a hero. Her voice held a note of surprise that stung more than it should have. I just did what anyone would do. But you're still there, in Arizona. Diane told Mom you took time off. Of course she had. My ex-wife and my dispatcher had remained friends after the divorce, united in their exasperation with my dedication to the road. I just wanted to make sure the baby was okay, I explained, aware of how inadequate it sounded. Dad, Sarah paused. This isn't like you. There it was again. The same thing Diane had said. Not like me to deviate from the schedule to let personal matters interfere with work. Was that really how everyone saw me? How I'd become? Maybe it should be, I said quietly. After we hung up, I lay back on the bed, staring at the water stains on the ceiling. What was I doing here? I had a life, a job, responsibilities. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I was exactly where I needed to be. My phone buzzed with a text from Reeves. Wilkins' story doesn't add up. Says father is unknown, but we found texts on her phone to someone named James. Meeting tomorrow to press her further. Thought you'd want to know. I texted back, can I be there? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then irregular, but I'll see what I can do. 9 a.m. station. The next morning, I arrived at the police station 15 minutes early, freshly showered and wearing my cleanest flannel shirt. Reeves met me in the lobby, eyebrows raised at my appearance. You clean up nice, Frank. Come on back. He led me to a small room with a one-way mirror looking into an interview room. Inside sat a young woman with lank blonde hair and dark circles under her eyes. Sandra Wilkins looked even younger than her 24 years, hunched in her chair as if trying to disappear. She's agreed to another interview, Reeves explained. I can't let you participate, but you can observe. Just keep your reactions to yourself. I nodded, and Reeves entered the interview room. I watched as he methodically broke down Sandra's story, presenting her with the text messages they'd found, the inconsistencies in her timeline. Finally, she cracked. Fine. I know who the father is, but it doesn't matter. He doesn't know about the baby, and he never will. That's not your decision anymore, Ms. Wilkins, Reeves said calmly. You gave up that right when you left your daughter in a cardboard box in the desert. She flinched at his words. You don't understand. He's not just some guy. He's James Harrington. Reeves's expression didn't change, but I saw him straighten slightly. James Harrington of Harrington Oil. She nodded miserably. We met when he was in Flagstaff for some business thing last summer. He stayed at the hotel where I was working then. It was just supposed to be a one-night thing, but she trailed off, tears forming. When I found out I was pregnant, I tried to contact him, but his assistant blocked me, said Mr. Harrington wasn't interested in gold diggers trying to trap him. I felt a surge of anger. James Harrington was a well-known figure in the Southwest. Old money, oil fields, political connections. I'd hauled equipment to his company's sites over the years. So you decided to abandon your baby rather than pursue child support? Reeves asked, his tone neutral, but his eyes hard. No, I was going to keep her. I had it all planned. But then I lost my apartment, and the hotel cut my hours, and my car broke down. She was crying openly now. I thought someone would find her quickly. I made sure she was fed and warm. I picked a spot where truckers stop all the time. I felt a chill run through me. She'd been counting on someone like me. And you didn't consider a hospital? A fire station? Any of the legal safe haven options? She shook her head. I panicked, and I was afraid they'd make me name the father. The Harringtons have lawyers everywhere. They'd bury me. Reeves leaned forward. Ms. Wilkins, we're going to need to verify your claim. That means contacting Mr. Harrington. He'll deny it, she said flatly. And who would believe me over him? DNA doesn't lie, Reeves replied. If James Harrington is the father, we'll know soon enough. After the interview, Reeves joined me in the observation room. Well, that complicates things. You believe her? I asked. About Harrington? Maybe. It's a big claim, but not implausible. Men like him, they think they're untouchable. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. Getting a DNA sample from him won't be easy, though. As she said, the Harringtons have lawyers everywhere. I thought about the baby. Still nameless, still alone except for temporary caretakers. What happens now? Now we enter the wonderful world of the rich and powerful, Reeves said grimly. I'll need to get a court order for a paternity test, which his lawyers will fight. Meanwhile, CPS will move forward with their process. Baby Jane goes to foster care today. The thought of her being handed off to yet another set of strangers made my stomach tighten. Can't that be delayed, just until we know more? Reeves gave me a long look. Frank, I've been cutting you a lot of slack because I respect what you did. But you need to understand something. You have no legal standing here. None. You're not family, not a guardian, not even a certified foster parent. His words hit hard, but I knew he was right. I was just a truck driver who happened to be in the right place at the right time. Nothing more. I understand, I said finally. I just want what's best for her. We all do, Reeves replied, his tone softening. But this is about to get complicated and ugly. Harrington won't take this lying down. If you want my advice, get back on the road, Frank. Let the system do its job. But as I walked out of the station into the bright Arizona morning, I knew I couldn't do that. Something had awakened in me, a purpose, a connection I hadn't felt in years. I was approaching a dark and dangerous cave, one filled with legal complexities and powerful enemies, and somehow I knew I had to enter it. The next 3 days passed in a blur of motels, phone calls, and growing frustration. I'd extended my personal leave with Diane, who was now openly concerned about my mental state. I'd spent hours researching Arizona family law at the Kingman Public Library, trying to understand the labyrinthine process that would determine baby Jane's fate. Reeves kept me updated when he could. As predicted, James Harrington had denied any relationship with Sandra Wilkins and refused to provide a DNA sample voluntarily. His legal team had filed motions to block the court order Reeves was seeking, citing harassment and claiming their client had never even met the woman in question. Meanwhile, baby Jane had been placed with a foster family, experienced caregivers who specialized in newborns awaiting permanent placement. Ms. Hernandez from CPS had reluctantly allowed me to visit once more before the transfer, watching with narrowed eyes as I held the baby and whispered goodbye. Mr. Miller, she'd said as I was leaving, I understand you feel connected to this child, but I need to be clear. Attachment without intention isn't helpful to anyone, least of all her. Her words had followed me back to my motel room, where I now sat staring at my laptop screen, reading about foster care statistics, adoption procedures, and the rights of biological versus adoptive parents. My phone rang. Reeves. We got the court order, he said without preamble. Harrington has to provide a DNA sample within 48 hours. That's good news, right? It's a start. But his lawyers are already preparing appeals. This could drag on for months. I closed my eyes, thinking of baby Jane growing older in foster care limbo while lawyers filed motions and countermotions. There has to be something we can do. We? Reeves's voice sharpened. Frank, I appreciate your concern, but this isn't your fight. It became my fight when I found her, I replied, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. Reeves was silent for a moment. Look, there's something else you should know. Sandra Wilkins is recanting. Says she made up the story about Harrington. What? Why would she do that? Take a wild guess. Someone got to her, offered her money, threats, or both. She's suddenly saying the father could be any number of men and she's not sure anymore. I felt a surge of anger. That's bullshit. Of course it is, but it complicates things legally. Without her testimony, the DNA order might be rescinded. After we hung up, I sat in the growing darkness of my motel room, a plan forming in my mind. It was reckless, possibly illegal, and definitely not something the old Frank Miller would consider, but I wasn't that person anymore. The next morning, I drove to the address I'd found online for Harrington Oil's regional headquarters, a gleaming glass building on the outskirts of Phoenix. I'd shaved, put on my one good shirt, and practiced what I would say. The receptionist looked up as I approached her desk. Can I help you? I have information regarding the Wilkins case that Mr. Harrington will want to hear personally, I said, projecting a confidence I didn't feel. She frowned. I'm not familiar with any Wilkins case. Do you have an appointment? No, but he'll want to see me. Tell him it's about the baby found on Route 66. Her eyes widened slightly. The story had been all over the news, but she maintained her professional composure. Please have a seat. I'll see if Mr. Harrington is available. I waited for nearly an hour, watching suited men and women pass through the lobby before a security guard approached me. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Mr. Harrington is not available and has no interest in speaking with you. Tell him Frank Miller isn't going away, I said, loud enough for others in the lobby to hear. Tell him I know about Sandra Wilkins and the baby. Tell him this story is going to get a lot bigger unless he does the right thing. The guard's expression hardened. Sir, don't make me remove you physically. I stood up slowly, towering over him. I drove 18-wheelers through Iraqi war zones as a contractor. You don't scare me, son. It was a bluff. I'd never been to Iraq, but it gave him pause long enough for me to add, I'll go. But tell Harrington this isn't over. Outside, my hands were shaking as I climbed into my rental car. What was I doing? Threatening one of the most powerful men in Arizona. I'd probably just earned myself a restraining order, or worse. My phone rang. An unknown number. Is this Frank Miller? The voice was male, cultured, with the faint accent of old money. Who's asking? My name is James Harrington. I understand you've been making quite a scene in my lobby. I gripped the phone tighter. Mr. Harrington, I'm surprised you called personally. Figured you'd have your lawyers do it. I prefer to handle certain matters directly, especially when they involve truck drivers making veiled threats about private affairs. There's nothing veiled about it, I replied. I found that baby. I held her in my arms while she cried. And I'm not going to stand by while you deny your own flesh and blood. A pause. Mr. Miller, I don't know what that woman has told you, but I can assure you. Save it, I cut him off. Take the DNA test. If it's negative, I'll disappear. If it's positive, do the right thing. It's that simple. Nothing about this is simple, Harrington replied, his voice colder now. Do you have any idea what you're involving yourself in? The complications? The legal ramifications? I know a man should take responsibility for his actions. A harsh laugh. Responsibility? You want to lecture me about responsibility? I employ thousands of people. I've built something that will last generations. What have you built, Mr. Miller? A life of solitude on the open road? His words hit closer to home than I cared to admit. This isn't about me. Isn't it? A lonely old man finding purpose by inserting himself into a situation that doesn't concern him, playing the hero. I felt my resolve wavering. Was that all this was? Some misguided attempt to find meaning in my twilight years? Take the test, I said finally, or I start talking to every news outlet that will listen. I'm sure they'd love to hear from the hero trucker about how James Harrington abandoned his own daughter. Silence stretched between us. Then, "You're making a mistake, Mr. Miller. A serious one." The line went dead. I sat in my car, heart pounding, wondering if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life, or finally done something that truly mattered. The call came 3 days later. I was back in my motel room, staring at the ceiling, wondering how long I could stretch my savings before I'd have to get back on the road. "Frank, it's Reeves. We got the results." My heart skipped. "And it's a match. Harrington is the father." I sat up, a wave of vindication washing over me. "He took the test? I thought his lawyers were fighting it." They were. Then suddenly yesterday, he voluntarily provided a sample. "Something changed your mind, Frank?" I smiled grimly. "Let's just say we had a conversation." "I don't want to know," Reeves sighed. "But listen, this doesn't automatically resolve anything. Biological connection doesn't equal parental rights or responsibilities. There's still a long road ahead." "But it's a start," I insisted. "Now he can't deny it. The truth is out." "Truth is just the beginning," Reeves replied. "Now comes the hard part." After hanging up, I drove to the foster home where baby Jane was staying. I'd been visiting daily, building a cautious relationship with the foster parents, the Thompsons. They were kind people in their 50s who had fostered dozens of children over the years. Mrs. Thompson met me at the door. "She's just been fed," she said, leading me to the nursery. I lifted baby Jane carefully, cradling her against my chest. She'd gained weight in the week since I'd found her, her face filling out, her dark eyes more alert. "I got some news today," I whispered to her. "We found your dad, whether he wants to be found or not." My phone buzzed with a text. "Unknown number. Mr. Miller. My office. 3 p.m. J.H." I stared at the message, then back at the baby in my arms. "Looks like we've got a meeting, little one." At precisely 3 p.m., I walked into Harrington Oil headquarters for the second time. This time, I was immediately escorted to a private elevator and up to the top floor. James Harrington was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with the polished look of old money and power. He stood as I entered his office, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Miller, please sit." I remained standing. "I'll keep this brief. What are your intentions regarding your daughter?" Harrington's jaw tightened. "Direct, aren't you? I've been advised not to have this conversation without lawyers present. Yet, here we are." He gestured to a chair again, and this time I sat. He took his own seat behind an imposing desk. "I didn't know about the child," he said finally. "Sandra never told me she was pregnant. Would it have mattered if she had?" His eyes flashed. "Contrary to what you might think, Mr. Miller, I'm not a monster. I have 2 children with my wife. I understand responsibility." "Then take responsibility for this one." Harrington leaned back in his chair, studying me. "You care about this child, a baby you found by chance." "Why?" The question caught me off guard. Why did I care so much? I'd been asking myself the same thing for days. "Because someone has to," I said finally. "Because she deserves better than being abandoned twice, first by her mother, then by her father." He nodded slowly. "My wife and we've been discussing this situation. She's understandably upset, but we're trying to approach this rationally. A baby isn't a business problem to solve. No, but there are realities to consider. Legal, financial, personal." He straightened some papers on his desk. "We're prepared to take financial responsibility, set up a trust fund for the child's education and care, while she stays in foster care, or gets adopted by strangers." Harrington's expression hardened. "What exactly are you suggesting, Mr. Miller? That I upend my family, my marriage, to raise an illegitimate child?" The word illegitimate made my blood boil. "That illegitimate child has a name." "Does she? I was told she's still being called Baby Jane." I hesitated. In my mind, I'd started thinking of her as Lily, a name that seemed to fit her somehow, but I had no right to name her. The point is, I continued, she's innocent in all this. She deserves a family who loves her. And you think that should be me? A man who didn't know she existed until a week ago? You're her father. Harrington stood and walked to the window, looking out over the Phoenix skyline. My wife can't have more children. Medical issues after our second. Did you know that? I shook my head, unsure where he was going with this. She's always wanted a daughter. We have 2 boys. He turned back to me. We're considering taking the baby, adopting her legally, raising her as our own. I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief that baby Jane might have a home, sadness at the thought of not seeing her again, suspicion about Harrington's motives. You'd acknowledge her as yours? Legally, yes. Publicly? We'd need to discuss the narrative, for everyone's protection, including hers. I stood up. She's not a PR problem to manage. She's a human being. I'm trying to do the right thing here, Miller. Are you? Or are you just trying to make this go away as cleanly as possible? Harrington's face flushed. You've made your point. You've forced my hand. Now step back and let me handle this my way. As I left his office, I felt hollow. I'd won, hadn't I? Baby Jane would have a home, a family, financial security, everything a child could need. So why did it feel like I was abandoning her all over again? The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings and paperwork. Harrington had moved quickly, his team of lawyers navigating the system with an efficiency that money buys. Sandra Wilkins had signed away her parental rights, reportedly in exchange for a settlement that would give her a fresh start, far from Arizona. I'd stayed in Kingman, extending my leave to the point where Diane had called to ask if I was ever coming back. I don't know, I'd answered honestly, surprising both of us. Today was the day baby Jane, now officially named Lily Grace Harrington, would go home with her father and his wife. I'd been granted permission to be present, a concession Harrington had made after our confrontation. The handover was taking place at the Thompsons' home where Lily had spent the past weeks. I arrived early, needing these last few moments with her. Mrs. Thompson met me with a sad smile. She's going to miss you, Frank. You've been so good with her. I held Lily one last time, memorizing her face, the weight of her in my arms. Be happy, little one, I whispered. Be loved. A black SUV pulled up outside. James Harrington emerged, followed by an elegant woman I assumed was his wife. They approached the house with measured steps, the uncertainty visible even in their practiced composure. The introductions were awkward. Mrs. Harrington, Catherine, seemed genuinely nervous, her eyes constantly drawn to the baby in my arms. James stood slightly apart, his expression guarded. Would you like to hold her? I asked Catherine. She nodded, stepping forward with arms outstretched. I placed Lily carefully in her embrace, watching as Catherine's face transformed with a mixture of awe and tenderness. She's beautiful, Catherine whispered, tears forming in her eyes. James moved closer, looking down at Lily. Something in his expression shifted, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from him. He reached out, touching Lily's tiny hand with one finger. Hello, Lily, he said softly. The moment was interrupted by the arrival of Ms. Hernandez from CPS, carrying the final paperwork. As the adults gathered around the dining table to sign documents, I stepped outside onto the porch, needing air. James followed me a few minutes later. It's done, he said. Legally, she's ours now. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Miller, he said after a pause, I misjudged you. I thought you were looking for attention or money or some kind of redemption story. And now? Now I think you're just a good man who did the right thing. He extended his hand. Thank you for finding her, for fighting for her. 6 months later, I pulled my truck into the driveway of a small house on the outskirts of Kingman. My house now, purchased with my retirement savings and the proceeds from selling my place in Albuquerque. I'd left long-haul trucking, taking a local delivery job that kept me close to home. Diane had been shocked. My kids, even more so. Dad settling down? Never thought I'd see the day. My son had joked during his first visit. The doorbell rang as I was unpacking groceries. I opened it to find James and Catherine Harrington, with Lily, now 7 months old, in Catherine's arms. "Sorry we're late," Catherine said, stepping inside. Someone didn't want to wake up from her nap. I smiled, reaching for Lily, who came to me eagerly. Our arrangement was unusual, unprecedented even, according to the lawyers. The Harringtons were Lily's legal parents, but they'd agreed to regular visits, to keeping me in her life as a sort of honorary grandfather. James set down a diaper bag. "We can stay until Sunday. The boys are at a soccer tournament with their grandparents." We settled into a comfortable routine, the awkwardness of our early meetings long gone. Over dinner, Catherine shared stories of Lily's first tooth, her attempts at crawling. James, initially reluctant about these visits, now seemed genuinely comfortable. Later, as I rocked Lily to sleep in the nursery I'd set up in my spare room, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. From a chance discovery on Route 66 to this unconventional family we'd created. "You changed everything, little one," I whispered to her sleeping form. "You gave an old trucker a reason to come home." The next morning, I sat on my porch with James, watching the sunrise over the desert. "I never thanked you," I said, "for letting me be part of her life." He nodded. "Catherine says it takes a village. In Lily's case, it took a truck driver, an oil executive, and a detective to create her village." He paused. "Reeves is coming for dinner tomorrow, by the way. Says he has news about Sandra. Good news, I hope. She's doing well, using the settlement to go to nursing school." He looked at me. "You know, when this all started, I thought it was the worst crisis of my life. And now? Now I can't imagine our family without Lily." He smiled. "Or without her stubborn guardian angel." Inside, we could hear Catherine singing to Lily, their laughter floating through the open window. The sound filled my heart in a way the open road never had. I'd spent decades searching for something I couldn't name, chasing horizons that always receded before me. Who would have thought I'd find it in a cardboard box on the side of Route 66? Not treasure, not adventure, but connection, family, home. The journey had changed me, resurrected parts of myself I thought long dead. And in return, I'd helped create something beautiful. Not just a home for an abandoned baby, but a bridge between worlds that might never have connected otherwise. As the sun climbed higher, painting the desert in gold, I knew with absolute certainty some detours are actually destinations in disguise.